You know, this is a story about a revolutionary designer. But the designer wasn't some famous architect or engineer. He was a teenager who, without his sight, used pure, elegant logic to solve a problem that had stumped the so-called experts for centuries. This is the incredible story of Louis Braille.
Okay, so let's just start with the fundamental question here. I mean, really think about it. How do you take the entire world of written language and translate it into something you can understand just by touch?
For basically all of human history, the answer for someone who was blind was brutally simple. You couldn't. Literacy was a wall you just couldn't climb. And the few tools that did exist, they were all designed by sighted people, and they completely, totally missed the mark on what it actually means to read by touch.
So, what was the world actually like before Braille came along? Let's take a quick look at the state of things for blind readers back in the early 19th century.
Well, the main system they had was based on embossed Roman letters. And let me tell you, it was a failure on pretty much every level. Reading was just painfully slow. I mean, can you imagine trying to feel the difference between an R and a B with just your fingertip? But what was even worse is that students couldn't write with it at all. They could only consume information, which created this weird kind of passive literacy. And the books themselves were huge, heavy, and super expensive. The entire Royal Institute in Paris owned just 14 of them. 14 for the whole school.
Then, a new idea finally showed up at the Institute. And it was a huge leap forward, for sure. But, and this is a big but, it was also built on one fundamental, critical mistake.
So in 1821, this retired army captain named Charles Barbier comes along with a system he called sonography. And this was a game changer because it used raised dots to represent sounds, not letters. But when a young student at the Institute, a kid named Louis Braille, got his hands on it, he saw the design flaw instantly.
And this right here, this is where the story completely changes. A 15-year-old student takes the core of this really flawed idea and just transforms it into something truly, truly revolutionary. Okay, so Barbier's system used a 12-dot cell, and it was just too tall. A fingertip couldn't read the whole thing in one go. You had to scan up and down for every single character. It was slow, it was clumsy. Braille's genius was in one simple, incredibly powerful insight. He just cut the cell in half. His 6-dot cell fit perfectly under a single fingertip. For the first time ever, this allowed for rapid, fluid reading. And he didn't stop there. He adapted the system for the entire alphabet, for numbers, and even for music.
And the system was just beautiful in its logic. It wasn't random at all. The first 10 letters, they form the foundation. To get the next 10, you just add a dot. For the final letters, you add another. So once you learn those first 10 characters, the rest of the alphabet just kind of naturally fell into place.
And wow, was it so much more than just an alphabet? By using these clever little prefixes, the same 64 combinations could represent numbers, they could represent math symbols, and get this, even a complex system for music notation that is still used today. This wasn't just a code, it was a complete toolkit for the mind.
Now you'd think an invention this revolutionary would be instantly adopted, right? You would be wrong. So wrong. The story now shifts from a moment of invention to a bitter, knockdown, drag-out fight for its very survival. The new director of the Institute, a man named Dufault, he saw Braille's code as a threat. He called it a secret code, just because the sighted teachers couldn't read it. And he actually feared that it would give the blind students too much independence. Can you believe that? Too much autonomy.
And the fight for Braille got intense. In 1841, the director ordered all the Braille books to be burned in the school courtyard. Burned! He took away the students' writing tools. But the students, they rebelled. They wrote in secret, using forks and knitting needles to poke dots into paper. They passed the code down to the younger children, keeping it alive. And this resistance, it all led to this stunning public demonstration that was so powerful, officials had no choice but to finally accept the system.
But even after it won in France, the fight wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Let's look at the global struggle for a single standard and the ultimate legacy of what Louis Braille created. Over in the English-speaking world, a totally chaotic period known as the War of the Dots kicked off. Instead of one standard, you had all these different competing systems. New York Point used horizontal dots, which were way less intuitive. American Braille actually reordered the letters based on how common they were, completely breaking the logical structure. It was just a nightmare of incompatibility that divided the blind community and made getting books a total lottery.
And the human cost of this chaos? Well, it was captured perfectly by Helen Keller. She said she had to learn 5 or 6 different systems just so she could read whatever books were available to her. It was a massive failure of standardization, and it hurt the very people it was supposed to help.
So what about the inventor himself? Well, in a really tragic twist, Louis Braille died at just 43 years old. He died from tuberculosis, a disease he very likely contracted in the damp, unsanitary conditions of the exact same school that he revolutionized.
It took 100 years, but he finally received the ultimate recognition. In 1952, his body was exhumed and reburied in the Pantheon in Paris. This is the resting place for France's absolute national heroes. We're talking Voltaire, Rousseau, Marie Curie. But there was this one unique, incredible request from his hometown. They asked that his hands be left behind. So while his body rests with the great minds of France, his hands, the very source of his tactile genius, they remain buried in the soil where he was born.
So is Braille obsolete in the digital age? Absolutely not. No way. It has evolved. We have refreshable Braille displays that translate screen text into tactile dots in real time. There are new codes to handle advanced mathematics, and the system has even been updated for the era of email and social media with something called Unified English Braille.
You know, in the end, Louis Braille did so much more than just invent a writing system. By designing for the user and not for the expectations of the sighted world, he proved that touch could be just as powerful a path to knowledge as sight is. He didn't just open a book, he opened up the entire world.